Good afternoon, maayong adlaw, maayong hapon. My name is Bea Cupin. You're watching Rappler, and I'm here at the Department of Education Central Office in Pasig City because over lunch, so mga 2 hours ago, nag-host si Vice President Sara Duterte ng meeting with chiefs of the security sector of the Philippines here, again at the DepEd headquarters. So, let me rattle off lang muna the people who were in attendance earlier. You have Lieutenant General Bacaro of the AFP, Lieutenant General Bronner of the Philippine Army, Fire Director Puracan of the BFP, Jail Director Iral of the BJMP, Coast Guard Admiral Abu of the PCG, Major General Cordura of the Air Force, Rear Admiral Valencia of the Philippine Navy, and you have Lieutenant General Malayo representing the PNP. So yung context nito, Sara Duterte is the OIC of the Philippines while President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is in Indonesia and tomorrow Singapore for his first state visits as the Commander-in-Chief or the head of state in the Philippines. So, kanina, nagkita nga si Vice President Sara Duterte with the security officials. According to her, or siguro before we jump into that, let's do some quick context sa meeting na nangyari kanina. Sara Duterte is the first VP to be OIC in a long time. Siguro for our younger viewers, they don't even remember a time na ang isang VP ay pinili bilang OIC while the President is out on official work outside of the country, right? So, she's the first VP as OIC in a really long time. Previously, kasi typically the President picks the Executive Secretary as his or her, or his, in the case of the 2 previous presidents, his OIC while he is away on official duty, be it an official visit or a state visit. Siguro added context nito is that it's the first time that we saw a tandem elected into power, of course. Vice President Sara Duterte was the vice presidential candidate of then presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. They're also the first na presidential and vice presidential candidate to win a majority mandate in the post-EDSA era. And they're also the first tandem, like I said, they're the first tandem to win as president and vice president since former President Lauren Macapagal Arroyo and former Vice President Noli De Castro. So sabi ni VP Sara kanina, kasi kanina, pinapasok kami sa bulwagan that's behind me in the DepEd complex. Pero we weren't actually witness to the meeting between the generals and the chiefs of the commands and the vice president. But she did say that they discussed interagency cooperation, referring to the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Education and the security sector. Again, Vice President Sara Duterte isn't just Vice President, she is also the Education Secretary. It's also been a while, well, actually 6 years, kasi under the previous president, who is the father of Vice President Sara Duterte, the Vice President then, Leni Robredo, held a cabinet post very shortly lang, 6 months, and then she left din because she was told to cease and desist from attending cabinet meetings then. That was back in 2016. Okay, so according to Sara Duterte, and let me check my notes from earlier so we get a fairly accurate quote. She said, as caretaker daw, she wanted to reiterate the Marcos administration's commitment to aggressively pursuing programs that will address social inequalities and the country's progress post-pandemic. What was striking about this visit is that the meeting was announced to the media the same day that Sara Duterte or Vice President Duterte was announced as the OIC, while President Marcos is off to Indonesia and Singapore. It's not clear if the meeting was called specifically because she was the OIC or this was planned prior, but Sara Duterte, Vice President Duterte, did say that she wanted to make sure that peace and order was there was peace and order in the country while the president was away, and that it would remain the same until he returns on the 7th when his state visits end. Quickly. So for context lang din, dito sa post-pandemic progress that she was saying, this was a major talk point during the campaign. If you covered or if you followed closely the updates of the Uniteam campaign in the 2022 national elections, malaking focus dito. Although wala sila talagang platform kasi na in-announce in the earlier months of the campaign, towards the end na lang sa last few weeks of the campaign period. Pero one emphasis that they did make was post-pandemic recovery, or at least, because I don't want to say post-pandemic, that implies na tapos na yung pandemic, no? Pero isa yung sa focus nila, yung economic recovery natin after almost 2 years of lockdown because of COVID-19. During her opening statement, Vice President Duterte did mention or make reference to mga forces daw who seek to derail yung progress that the administration, the government is seeking. This is rhetoric that she's used before, although this time she didn't really specify who those forces were or what those forces are, or the identity of those forces. But if you've been following Vice President Sara Duterte, she has made, yung rhetoric is very familiar, and she has made these statements referring to the CPP, NPA, but she's also red-tagged members of the Makabayan bloc, for instance. But this time, though, she did not name names. Okay, hold on. Let me flip the page. She also mentioned in her opening statement yung hardline policy versus criminals and terrorists, but she didn't go into detail. In fact, she said din naman during a Q&A, with a very, very short Q&A with the media, wala naman daw specific threat na nag-trigger ng meeting na to. She just wanted to meet with officials of the security sector to ensure, again, peace and order until President Marcos returns. Another thing that they talked about was, again, coordination between the OVP, the DepEd, and the security sector. And finally, and I guess this is a development that our viewers who have children, who have loved ones, who are still studying, we also brought up the topic of ROTC. Specifically, they had, quote-unquote, an exchange of ideas daw, to possibly move forward, ways to move forward daw, and to put meat into the proposal raised by President Marcos to make ROTC mandatory for grades 11 and 12. If you recall, this was part of the legislative priorities that President Marcos laid out during his State of the Nation address before the 19th Congress in late July. That is it for now here from the DepEd Central Office. Again, that was a quick recap of Vice President Sara Duterte's lunch meeting with heads of the security sector here in the Philippines. We'll give you more updates, not just on that, and not just on the proposals or the topics that they talked about, but also sa state visits ni President Marcos in Indonesia and Singapore. We'll give you more details on that. And actually, mag-recap din kami noon in the coming days to tell you what happened in Singapore and Indonesia and what it means for the average Filipino. This has been Bea Cupin. Thank you again for watching. Bye!